The game studio that developed the early Halo games, Marathon, and the Destiny franchise started off with little to no of what it would become. It was made after the father of the founder wished for him to get a job. By making this one choice and making a Pong clone, we now have the well-known game studio, infamous now for the mass layoffs, Bungie Incorporated. Bungie has worked for both Microsoft and Sony, partnered with Activision, and has also worked independently. After being acquired by Microsoft, Bungie's current project was taken over too. The game became the launch title for Microsoft's first console, the Xbox. The game that ended up repurposed for the launch title game for Microsoft's Xbox was Halo Combat Evolved. Bungie and Microsoft ended up making 4 games under the Halo title: Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2, Halo 3 and the prequel for Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, and Halo Reach, which ended up being the last game Bungie would make working under Microsoft. After Bungie left, Microsoft would make 343 Studios to continue making the Halo games. 343 Studios was named after a character in the first Halo game named 343 Guilty Spark. Bungie would go independent after finishing Halo Reach, but the intellectual property of the Halo franchise would stay with Microsoft, leaving Bungie to make a new game franchise to keep them going. Bungie would then partner up with another game studio well known for making the first-person shooters that rivaled the Halo games under the Call of Duty title, Activision. They soon published the first game of Bungie's flagship franchise, Destiny. The game was filled with huge problems though. The voice actor, Peter Dinklage, the voice of the companion, the Ghost, was extremely lackluster with his performance, being as monotone as possible. One line in particular made the community make many jokes about it.
That wizard came from the moon.
Bungie themselves realized how bad it was and even made merch around the line. When the first expansion that fans could buy, The Dark Below, was released, things were looking good for the franchise, adding many things to make the game feel better. After the third expansion was launched, The Taken King, Peter Dinklage was replaced, and all previous lines were changed over to Nolan North, who continues to do the voice acting for the Ghost to this day. The Dark Below was released the same year as another expansion, as a part of an expansion pack. The other expansion in the pack was House of Wolves. House of Wolves was seen as way better than The Dark Below, and was widely received as such by many game reviewers such as IGN and Games Radar Plus. The Dark Below plus the base game gave endgame content, which is content for people that are ready for harder experiences, called raids. These raids were 6-person activities with different puzzles and mechanics that you needed to complete while taking on the boss of each raid. The boss of the first raid, Vault of Glass, is known as Atheon, with Crota, son of Oryx, being the Crota's End boss. At the end of each raid, everyone has a very slim chance of getting the raid exotic. Vault of Glass has Vex Mythoclast, and Crota's End had Necrochasm. I personally have 105 clears of Vault of Glass, and it took me 98 attempts to get Vex Mythoclast. The major expansions after the expansion pack were released annually, with The Taken King being the Year 3 expansion and Rise of Iron being Year 4. The Taken King was majorly important to the storyline and was about Oryx, the Taken King, arriving in Sol, or the solar system, to avenge his dead son, Crota, by killing all of humanity. After we beat him in his mortal form, he takes himself and goes to his throne world, where we must fight him on his dreadnought in the Rings of Saturn in the King's Fall raid. We then do the Rise of Iron expansion, where the Fallen try to use Siva, a nanobot that can make almost anything. We defeat them with the help of the last Iron Lord, known as Lord Saladin. Though, the Cosmodrome, a Russian spaceport, gets shut down due to the events of Rise of Iron and Siva. After Rise of Iron, Destiny 1 would be complete, and the announcement of the second game would excite the community. With Destiny 2 releasing a year after the final expansion of Destiny 1, people did not need to wait long for the new game. Destiny 2 released with the Red War campaign, where the Red Legion, a faction of Cabal, which is a race that lives for war, invades the tower and the last city, the final safe place for humanity under the Traveler. Bungie is now having someone attempt to sue them over the campaign due to the story being remarkably close to someone else's. At the time, the looter shooter game seemed to be drier than a desert when it came to things to do and rewards to loot. After Red War, we got our first Destiny 2 expansion with Curse of Osiris. But Curse of Osiris was not well received, with little endgame and nothing to do after completing the campaign, leaving fans bored and wishing for anything to do that was not a repeatable mission or activity with minimal loot drops. Bungie knew that they had to do something about the low player count and terrible loot incentive. After the terrible first year of the base game with Curse of Osiris and another expansion known as Warmind, based around the AI named Rasputin. So, in year 2 of Destiny 2, they came out with what is seen as the best expansion ever, Forsaken. Forsaken was based around the prince of a race known as the Awoken, and his fall to darkness. In this expansion, Prince Aldrin kills the beloved character Cayde 6, the Hunter Vanguard. Bungie seemed to be saved, with huge movement in the story and huge amounts of new players. With this high, Bungie would follow up the next year with an extremely boring story that people didn't like with Shadowkeep. Shadowkeep was based on the moon and the arrival of the main enemy with the Black Fleet, a large army of huge pyramid ships. Bungie then started selling seasons, which were extra, smaller stories to keep people occupied in between expansions. But to get these seasons, people had to go and buy in-game currency known as silver. They would have to buy more silver than needed to get the season. This was the push that Bungie needed to start leeching off people for more and more money. Each season would have exclusive items that you could not get ever again. They would sell these quote-unquote exclusive cosmetic items in later seasons for the same in-game currency, and the weapons would be purchasable in multiple different ways later too. The people would see this and be furious that they spent money on items just for them to be available later for cheaper. In the next expansion, Beyond Light, people would be even more livid when they would log on to see that almost every weapon was deemed useless due to Bungie removing the ability to level up some weapons. Originally, after Shadowkeep, Destiny 2 should have ended and Destiny 3 should have come out, but Bungie changed their mind and kept D2. Even though Beyond Light was mostly seen as bad, we had gotten a new power type made from darkness, Stasis. It was the first time since the beginning of Destiny 2 that we had gotten new powers. The community was excited to try them out. The powers were really good, so good in fact, that in the PvP aspect they overshadowed the others, especially on the Hunter. They were given a dive that when landing next to an easy to obtain set of crystals, you could kill any player instantly that was relatively close to them. This caused a lot of backlash, making Bungie have to change it. But Bungie took their time with it, taking them from February to May 2021 to finally change it. At this time too, Bungie kept adding more options to pay for stuff inside the game, with events like Festival of the Lost, the Halloween event, and Dawning, the Christmas event. During Beyond Light, Bungie turned 30 years old, so they had an in-game event for it. Of course, you had to pay for most of it too. Paying for it would give you the ability to do a dungeon, an endgame 3-person activity, and unlock armor, vehicles, and weapons, including an exotic rocket launcher from Destiny 1 known as Gjallarhorn. After Beyond Light, we have Witch Queen. The Witch Queen expansion was very well liked by the community and gave many new things for people. It gave people the ability to craft weapons with enhanced perks. This made some guns better than others, but it took some time to be able to craft them. The community liked being able to craft guns and make them better for putting a little more effort in. During Witch Queen, Bungie had to defend abortion rights. Bungie was told by commenters to stick to the games. At the same time, they made it so seasonal dungeons had to be bought with silver and weren't a part of the season pass anymore. But don't worry, because you can always pay more at the beginning of an expansion to get all seasons and dungeons within the expansion. The low price of $140 led people to be mad at Bungie once again. Buying expansions now had multiple different prices, and all seasons were increased in price too, meaning that you had to pay more for each individual season. Other than the increase in expenses, the story and gameplay was well made, and the community was very pleased with it. Bungie was also acquired by Sony, the company that owns PlayStation, for $3.6 billion. This was to make sure that Bungie didn't need to lay off workers. The fall of everything started with Lightfall. Fitting, right? Lightfall was built up to be a huge war of light versus dark. but it ended up being a mess with comedic relief in all the wrong places. Lightfall also came out with a new power from Dark, using the threads of life called Strand. It was also broken, giving hunters another broken dive that could suspend enemies in the air. Warlocks got an ability that made them invincible, but they couldn't attack anything. Bungie came up with a starter pack for Destiny 2 back in 2020. It came with 3 exotic weapons, a few materials, a ghost shell, and a ship and sparrow. It was $14.99 and gave relatively nothing worth buying, and for new players, it seemed enticing due to them not knowing the price of each item. So Bungie gave some things to tide the community over. They gave ways to get crafting weapons from a raid. They came out with a new game mode called Onslaught that was a tower defense against the enemies from across the game. They also cobbled together a harder version of raids where it was an encounter from most of every raid with additions to make it harder. It was called the Pantheon, and a new one came out each week from April until the week Final Shape released. Each week added a new encounter and increased its level by 5 power levels. When the Final Shape launched, the community was excited. We got the Return of Cade 6, the end of the story, and a new 12-person activity to end off the Light and Dark saga. Bungie once again seemed saved. They had money from the acquisition, a great end of story, and they had more story to come with episodes. But it didn't end in a good way. The episodes were just rebranded seasons with less content and returning weapons in each episode pass. Bungie also went through a new set of layoffs, with even more being lost this time. 220 employees gone, one a week away from her maternity leave. This was 17% of Bungie's workforce, and more employees were moved from Bungie to Sony. The CEO of Bungie, Pete Parson, spent all the acquisition money on a new exotic car collection. But on a good note, Bungie sued and took down a cheat service for Destiny 2 called Ring 1. They also are making a new mobile game that is based in a different universe inside Destiny. Bungie is also being sued for stealing a story. The Red War campaign is the story being sued over. They say that the story is being ripped from their book. It looks pretty suspicious since the story came out in 2018 and is now getting sued. Even with all these bad things happening around us, Bungie is still up and people are still playing the game and enjoying it. Bungie going from making Pong clones called Nop, Pong backwards, in a college dorm to becoming a multi-billion-dollar company well known across the world is a miracle in of itself. They've created thousands of memories with Halo and Destiny, and I have to thank them for everything that they've done for charity, even though they failed to screw people over financially. Thank you very much for watching. This video took way longer than expected to make. I made the script and did the recording and editing all by myself. I may have also been doing this for school as well. I had many issues with my mic during the recording of this video. My mic broke entirely and I had to get a new one. That one didn't work, so I had to go back to the old one that started working slightly again. I currently can only hear out of my left ear. So thank you very much for watching.